You're seeing me, throw this stuff. I'm also throwing it over here, right? Here's a bed I've mulched, and I consider this stem a mulch, right? Why am I not worried about slugs and snails? Because a lot of you are watching me and saying, oh my God. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com. A little windy outside today, so hopefully that's not too bad for recording. But I'm picking some kale. It's middle to late, I guess, November 2020. And this is the best time to harvest kale. It's also the best time to, blanch and freeze your kale because you're capturing its flavor at the height of its flavor, right? The winter frost. I live in Nova Scotia, Canada. The overnight frosts. I was out here one night after work a couple nights ago, just mulching my beds, and actually some of the edges of these beds were starting to freeze. So anyway, that's the time of year when your carrots start tasting good, your parsnips start tasting good, and your kale starts tasting really good. So this is the time of year I like to harvest a lot of kale. And this video is about harvesting kale, but not what you might think. So what am I doing here? I'm picking off these stems, and I'm examining them, right? These ones are all kind of no good. And what am I doing with them? I'm just throwing them right on the ground, okay? All right, some of the stems are good, some of the stems are just, so that's a good stem, right? That's a good one. So I'm gonna take the leaves, put the stem right back there. There's another one, pretty good shape. I'm gonna take the leaves, put the stem back here. This is how I harvest my kale all season long. Spring, summer, fall, right? Generally speaking, right? I'll come out, that one's no good, just throw it on the ground. That one's a good one, take the greens, throw the stems. Yes, I know you can eat the stems, but when you have the amount of kale I have, right, this is not all the kale I have, a lot of kale, right? I don't buy kale, I have so much kale, right? We eat kale 2, 3, 4 times a week, never have to buy it because I freeze so much. We have it all season long, and I freeze so much, we don't really run out till maybe April. Sometime in April we were running out of kale. And then in May and June we just take a break from kale because we eat kale 2, 3, 4 times a week every other month of the year. So it's nice to just actually go to the store and buy, all the things. I normally don't buy produce, but during those 2 months I actually buy produce and I enjoy. I don't worry about how much it costs. I buy whatever I want because I've saved so much, right? I figured out that I save $2,000 or $3,000 in produce a year. But to get back to the topic of this video, you're seeing me, throw this stuff. I'm also throwing it over here, right? Here's a bed I've mulched, and I consider this stem a mulch, right? Why am I not worried about slugs and snails? Because a lot of you are watching me and saying, oh my God, if you throw that on the ground, it's going to attract slugs and snails. Well, there's two mentalities to keeping a garden where slugs and snails are concerned. The one mentality is keep them out of your garden at all costs, either by using different kinds of pesticides or by having a garden that is just absolutely not favorable to slugs and snails. The much more famous than me YouTube personality, book author Charles Dowding, his method of gardening, he doesn't have stuff like this on top of his soil. He composts everything, and he just adds an inch or so of fresh compost to his garden every single year. And that's an environment where it's really not favorable in slugs and snails because they have nowhere to hide, right? They got lots of places to hide where my garden is. But, if there really were a huge problem, I wouldn't have all this kale because they love kale. And, just to speak to that a little bit, I do have a little bit of a problem with slugs and snails early in the season, like when the plants are a couple inches high. I use a little bit of slug bait, right? Safer slug and snail killer, which is basically just iron and a couple other things. So it's, as slug baits go, for me anyway, it's benign enough that I don't really worry about what the effect it's having on the broader ecosystem. I have a 2,500 square foot garden. There's only a handful of plants I have to use slug bait for, and I only use it for a few weeks of their development in the growing season, and then I don't use it at all, right? So for my entire garden here, all 2,500 square feet, I might use a quarter cup of slug pellets, maybe a third of a cup of slug pellets for the whole thing for an entire season, right? And most of that slug bait is actually just like stuff they like to eat. There's the actual thing that's killing them, the iron, I think it's iron, I'll put it up there. I think it's iron sulfate, or there's like iron and sulfur and, a couple other things, right? There's a number of things in there, but the proportions are so tiny, right? You're really not having a negative effect. I'm just speaking to this because I know every time I mention I use slug bait, oh my God, you should use beer and stuff like that. When you have a garden this size, you can't just use cups of beer everywhere. It just doesn't work. So, what I find, and I'm getting way off topic here, but the point is that my mentality where slugs and snails are concerned is they're just part of the system, and they're good for the soil. Okay, they're not good for your kale, but they're good for the soil. And insofar as they're good for your soil, they're good for your kale because they're improving the soil, right? If a slug eats this kale stem, it's going to go, and that's most likely what's going to eat this, right? They're everywhere here, right? It's going to go in one end of the slug, out the other end of the slug, and it's going to become slug manure, and it's going to be good for my soil. And there's other things in the soil that'll work on that slug manure, and eventually all that stuff's going to find its way into my plants and produce, next August, these 3-foot high kale plants that I enjoy eating and taste so good, right? So for me, the slugs are like, when people say, have ducks in your gut, they're my livestock, right? They're breaking a lot of stuff down, and they're a problem when the plants are really small, but once the plants get big, the slugs tend to not go up the plant, right? The base, it's hard to see here, but the base of the plant becomes very woody, and they're going along the ground, they encounter that woody base of the plant. It doesn't seem like anything they're interested in, so they're not gonna risk going up into the light to figure out what's higher up in the plant. If you have a kale plant, right, the slug's not going to go up the woody stem, because slugs don't eat that, and try to, it's not going to, every inch it goes up that plant and it's going into the light, it's taking a greater and greater risk of being picked off by some bird. And, I live in a natural forested area, there's birds everywhere, so the slugs are risk averse. They're not making decisions like you or I, but they're just, they've sort of evolved to prefer shade, prefer not to have sunlight on them, because whenever a slug gets sunlight on it, something sees it, flies in out of the sky and kills it. The slug can eat this half-rotten kale stem that's on the ground, or it can climb up and have this nice juicy fresh kale up in the air. Now, I think about it, if you had to make a decision, you can eat a hamburger, which is okay, assuming you're not a vegetarian, right? I'm thinking of myself here. You could eat a hamburger, it's okay. Or you could eat like a perfectly cooked steak from the finest steakhouse in the land, right? Well, give me the steak, please, because I like steak. Now, what if I said, if you eat the hamburger, you can be safe. If you eat the steak, there's a chance you'll be killed by a lion, and it's a good chance. Oh, I'm never going to eat that steak, ever. Anyone, why? I would not risk my life for a steak, right, as much as I like it, right? I'm going to eat the hamburger. And all this stuff I'm throwing on the ground here, right, this stem, that's a hamburger. That's perfectly good food if you're a slug. It's better than most of the things slugs eat. So, yeah, sure, this nice green thing up in the air here is the filet mignon. But, what good is eating filet mignon if you're being eaten alive by a lion or a tiger, right? So that's what I'm doing here. That's why I'm throwing, I've sort of taken a roundabout way of speaking to this, but I was just out, I did not come out here to make a video. I came out here to get some kale to blanch and freeze it, and I just got thinking, I bet you a lot of people are going to be really intrigued by the fact that I'm throwing all these stems on the ground. I do this all season long. The stems just disappear. They literally just disappear. And my whole garden's fenced in, so it's not like there's rabbits and deer and things coming in here to take them out. They're being taken out by the soil organisms, Some of them are just rotting, or they're being processed by different kinds of fungi, or maybe worms are doing some work there. All kinds of different things are working on these, but I would say primarily it's probably slugs and snails. Because if you peel back a little bit, you can usually find them. It's usually not too hard to find them. And I'm not seeing a lot right now, but it was, it's been cold at night lately, so they tend to be going down into the ground. They're not just hanging around in the debris anymore, because it's getting to freezing temperatures at night. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. Maybe you think this is a crazy idea, but I've been doing this for years. I get good results. I only have a short-term problem with slugs and snails in the spring when the plants are really small and vulnerable. And other than that, and you don't have to use slug pellets like I'm using. You can use diatomaceous earth. Depending on the size and scale of your garden, you can try to pick them off and that sort of stuff. Actually, because I know people always make these suggestions, I have found one of the best ways to keep your slugs and snails under control is to just keep your like for something like a kale, to keep the plants, keep the foliage under control. Open up the space, right? Pick things, pick and use, right? Right? Because you're basically letting the light in. You're taking a shady place which slugs love, and I've had videos on this before, and you're turning it into a sunny space which terrifies slugs, right? If it's shady, they'll attack your plants during the day whenever they want because they feel safe. If it's sunny, they're scared. There's only a real risk at night. And even then, if you've got all this, stuff laying on the ground, the stuff laying on the ground is better than most of the stuff they find in nature anyway, right? So they're going to go for that, right? And they're really not going to attack your plants. So just a few thoughts. I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.